Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Kyle of Asgard, and today what we're going to be doing is what I hope to be the fastest and easiest way to make some aluminium wheels to use for a belt grinder, linisher, or anything of a similar project. Making a very simple 3D printed profile and then casting them and cleaning them up out of aluminium. One thing I'm quite fond of doing is trying to figure out the perfect balance between the fastest way to make something with the least setback time. So, today what we're going to be doing is I've made this 3D printed cup shape, and inside there is a 20mm little nozzle with a hole in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a steel rod straight through there, invest this in some sand, and then just pour molten aluminium straight into it. So for any of you who are not familiar with metal casting, I am enveloping my 3D prints. Enveloping? Is that the word I want? I'm filling around it with dried sand so that when I pour the molten aluminium, it doesn't wander away and it tries to keep that original shape. If you do not know anything about metal casting and you decide to give it a try, please do your research. A big important thing to know is that whatever you're pouring into, you cannot have any moisture or water in it. If that sand had just a little bit of moisture in it, when you pour the aluminium, it can actually explode into your face and everything else around you, and nobody needs that. So safety is kind of important, and that's just a good thing to know ahead of time.
Oh Lord Jesus, it's a fire!
So the other side of the coin for doing metal casting, dry components will catch on fire, and in this case it was the molten plastic that was combining with the aluminium. So when I did this, I just tried blowing it out. It was being a bit stubborn, so I ended up just putting sand on it. I have fire extinguishers nearby and whatnot. If you're doing anything like this, don't for the love of God throw water onto it. Just cover it in some sand. Try to make sure that nothing else flammable is nearby, and always have something like a fire extinguisher available should you need it. Given. Okay, so slight problem, and funnily enough, it's not the fire. Fire is no big deal. What ended up happening is, because this is a real sketchily built kiln, the heating element broke off the insulated ceramic heat resistant block, which cut the power to heating, so the aluminium was only hot enough to melt, not hot as fuck to pour. So I ended up having to quickly pour it, which resulted in one being maybe usable, and the one being definitely not usable. So I'm going to have a crack at machining one of them, just to see how it turns out. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my drill press with a 2-axis vise as a makeshift milling machine. Now generally this is not good to do for your drill press because of the way the chucks are mounted and all that jazz, but if I'm being gentle, it's generally alright. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're being a tight ass like me, it does the trick. Here I've chucked a wooden skewer inside the 3mm hole so that I can mount it on my drill press and just give it a light skim over with the power file. I've used a wooden skewer as it's a little bit bigger than the steel rods that I had, which means that it's not going to slide out now that the aluminium has cooled down and shrunk again. If I use the steel ones, it'll just slide off. If you're a woodworker, I'm sorry for what you're about to see. For everybody else who doesn't know what this is a wood drilling Forstner bit. Not usually recommended to use on wood, but aluminium is pretty soft and it's a cheap bit, so I wasn't overly fussed about using it for this part, and it did a really nice job, all things considered. So here is the one that I've very roughly machined. Unfortunately, I think that side, that's definitely not centered. So using the 3mm hole that was to center this whole thing, I used that with a Forstner bit to make the hole for these bearings that I have. Now it's a 25mm hole. What I've recently realized is these are a 26mm bearing, not 25. And you want a snug fit with a bearing, but that's just not going to happen. This side waste of time, and as well as that, I think overall this thing is too narrow. Yeah, it's 5mm too short. So this is now just a piece of aluminium that's going to get remelted down, same with this, and chucked into another one. But if you look closely, the surface isn't ideal, but that's 52mm. This is meant to be a 50mm wheel, so I should be able to grind off a whole millimeter around the edge. That was my mistake, and that bit I believe. But I should be able to grind a whole millimeter off around the entire surface to make a clean finished product. So that wraps up part 1 for today's video. The reason I'm showing this is because this is half of what making is. If you think that you can just start making something and everything's going to go perfectly the first time, you're wrong. And you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. When you make stuff, it's all about this. It's about trial and error, working shit out, and figuring out ways that other people haven't done stuff, or ways that you can speed up your own process or do a better job. And with this, there was a number of things that I did in an order that I shouldn't have. For example, when I drilled this side's hole with the Forstner bit, which is the one that makes this big hole, I then followed it up with an 8mm hole down the middle just to open that up to make it a bit easier to drill the other side. Not really thinking that through because I needed that 3mm hole to center it. So that's why this one is off center. So just little things like that. And I think what I'll do next time is was wanting a 50mm piece. I gave it an extra 20mm in case the aluminium was a bit crap on the end, and it was. But because of the furnace breaking down, it kind of made it a little bit colder than it should have been, which gave me less product in this. So next time I'll make it 80mm longer. And so that way I know I've got a little bit extra meat that I can cut off. I won't rush to pour it. Part of the reason I rush to pour it is because it's been a year since I did my last video, and YouTube's going to cancel my partnership if I don't post anything. So that's why this random video has come out of the blue. If you want to see more of this and how to continue doing it, feel free to subscribe. It's free, and I hope to have you viewing my stuff later on in the future. All the best.